everyone. We'll give folks a few minutes to log in, and then we'll get started. So we've got about 44, 45. Nope, number's still climbing. We'll give everybody just a minute. Okay. All right, it looks like we've got about 50 participants on the call right now, and we have 2:30 on the clock, so we will go ahead and get started. Thank you all very much for joining us today. Thank you, Mike Carroll from Intelligent Conversations, for being here to talk to us about the new realities of sales in our new reality. So I am going to turn things over to Mike. There will be a couple of opportunities for Q&A during this session, and you'll see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So we're just going to ask you to type your questions there, and then we will make sure that we can answer as many as we can. So thank you, Mike. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for inviting me, Kelly. And it looks like we already have our first question. I believe we are recording this. It looks like
Yes.
The record is on. So Christopher Provo wanted to know. So yes, Christopher, we are recording. Give me 1 second to switch my slides around here and get this up and live.
Yes, we are recording, and the recording will be available to everyone. We'll send that information out as soon as it's ready.
Let me share my screen. Okay, I think you need to stop sharing, Kelly, and then I can. There you go. All right, and then I'll go with this slide. Cool. All right, we're there. Everyone see my first slide? Are we good? Excellent. All right. Well, I'm going to get going. So, thank you all for taking some time out of your day to talk about building your sales team for a post-COVID economy. I don't think anybody expected to have the brakes applied so quickly. It reminds me almost of a combination of what happened right after 9/11, when everything just stopped and all flights stopped, and it was just like, I don't know how many people on the call remember that. But it's almost a combination of that and also what happened in 2008, because it was like everything changed, everything was topsy-turvy. Let me share my agenda. What I want to cover today is, and I'm coming at this from the perspective of sales management, but a lot of it is going to apply to salespeople as well. So first question I want to explore is, who's able to sell in this environment? How is selling different, and what are the attributes and strengths that you need as salespeople? And so if you're a salesperson, do you have those attributes and strengths? What are they? And how can you make sure that you hone them? And if you're a sales manager, as I go through kind of the attributes that you need to be successful in this environment, think about who on your team has them and where you need to spend some coaching time. I then want to talk specifically to sales leaders. What are some of the best practices for remote coaching? How do we maintain and build a culture of accountability? And it's a little bit different. I mean, we hopefully already have a culture of accountability, but it's a little bit different when dealing with a remote environment. Then we'll pivot and talk about peer accountability and feedback loops. If you're a salesperson on this call, I think one of the best things you can do is buddy up with somebody in your company and hold each other accountable and make it fun and make it competitive, but also that peer-to-peer coaching feedback is really valuable. It helps you learn. If you're the one giving the feedback, it also helps cement the ideas for you, but it also gives your counterpart a different perspective than maybe they're getting from the manager. And then we'll talk about some what we're sharing with our clients around best practices for sales productivity. And again, it's different in a remote environment. And I'll touch briefly on systems and processes and some of the challenges that we're seeing as companies who weren't set up for remote selling are now pivoting to that? What are some of the tools that we're using and some of the things that we're seeing in our client base? So that's what's on my agenda. Let me just glance over and see if there's any other topics that you wanted to make sure I hit. Now would be a great time to just put it in the Q&A. I may or may not have a slide for it, but I'll do my best to work it in if you wanted to add anything to this list that I have on the screen right now. So I'm assuming that you like this agenda because I'm not seeing any questions fill in, so I'll just keep rolling. But obviously throughout this, if you have a question, just chime in. So let's talk about who can sell in this environment. I think probably the single biggest change is the sales conversation is different. It's no longer a why me sale. We really have to sell value. We really have to think about who on our team, or if I'm a salesperson, how do I sell value? It's no longer a why me, it's a why, right? Every customer that you have out there is probably wondering, how do I conserve cash? How do I stretch this out? How do I keep jobs going and minimize what I'm investing in this? And so you really have to make a case. So, are you capable of selling value over price? Are you able to quickly develop rapport, even in the face of resistance, even in the face of, hey, we're not spending any money right now? Are you asking enough questions, and are you asking great questions? Now is where value selling is really at a premium. You have to be comfortable talking about money. You have to have a high money threshold. There's a lot of pressure on companies, your customers, who are trying to conserve cash. And I'm not saying increase your prices randomly, but hold firm on price. This isn't the time to discount, and really take the time to understand and learn why your prospects are buying. When you can connect your product or solution back to the business problem we're solving, or the benefit that's going to accrue to them, and why that's important to them. And better yet, if we can ask them questions to get them to articulate that value, that's where they're actually doing the selling for us. We have to engineer the conversation to go that way, so the questions we ask them help them build the case, help them create urgency to move forward. So selling value is more important than ever. That's one of the key attributes. I think another attribute is being a consultative salesperson. What does that mean? Well, first and foremost, it's all about relationships and trust. You have to be able to build rapport. You have to be able to have solid relationships. You have to be able to earn the right to ask tough, timely questions by establishing your expertise and building trust. You need to really focus on listening. Probably the most underrated attribute of a salesperson in this environment is your ability to be patient and your ability to listen. And when you listen, know what question to ask next. I think a lot of times, when the economy was rolling along and it was just collecting orders, we almost didn't have to listen. We could just kind of say, okay, which products do you need? Let's fill that order. We can get that to you next week. And now we really have to slow down a little bit, listen carefully, and have a conversation that's not as predictable. Have a conversation that maybe, they're going to give us some information. We have to ask follow-up questions, look at that from every aspect, think about how that impacts the timing of the job they're on. Think about how that impacts their supply chain, or their, customer and their end customer, right? So there's a lot of different questions that we need to ask. And if you listen carefully and then ask the next logical question, you'll be in a more consultative selling role. Being able to stay focused and in the moment. I think sometimes as salespeople, we let our mind wander. We ask a question and they start to answer, and we start to think about how we're going to respond to that. The question to ask is, are you really listening, or are you waiting for your turn to talk, right? And so your ability to stay present and focused and just laser focus on listening, the more you do that, the better you're going to be able to help guide them toward the right decision, the better you're going to be able to move them beyond nice to have to gotta have. And that's going to help create that urgency. Make sure you're patient, make sure you're not rushing to a solution, make sure you're not transactional, and really make sure you're asking enough questions, asking tough questions, and really getting them to think differently. And then finally, remote selling, right? So we're all remote salespeople right now. And I think the keys to that is, number one, being a self-starter, right? Can you work well independently? Can you work well in an environment where many of you on the call probably already used to selling remotely? If you're an outside sales, you probably have that environment. But really staying motivated, staying focused, knowing exactly every morning where do I need to focus my time, energy, and effort for the greatest outcome. Starting early, and working in sprints. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. And I think it's important now to really stay on top of your follow-ups. Really make sure that you're entering stuff into your CRM, and that you're on top of all the administrative tasks as well. You've got the time now, maybe more than when you're driving around in your truck and going from job site to job site, right? And you have to. Probably the hardest part about being a remote salesperson, if you're not used to that environment, is handling the rejection and the minor setbacks and the put-offs that you're going to get in this sales environment. And so that's why, again, I think a buddy system where you have a peer-to-peer accountability set up really helps fortify you for the sales environment, because you're no longer in an office setting where you can kind of like shore each other up. So make sure that you have somebody that you can talk to, because you are going to face rejection. You are going to have conversations that seem productive, and then they kind of stop at the end and say, hey, we're not in a position to make any decisions right now. We're on pause for another month or so, right? So make sure that you kind of stay mentally positive and not let the little setbacks and put-offs put you down. So remote selling is key. And then unless, if you're a sales leader, unless you can answer, yes, all my people have all those things for those 3 previous slides, now is the time where coaching is more important than ever. Coaching, typically, when I talk to sales managers, a lot of sales managers say, yeah, I coach my team all the time. And what they really mean is they look at the pipeline once a week, and their coaching conversations tend to focus on the bottom of the funnel. What's closable right now? How can I help you with that, right? And I want you to think, if you're a sales leader, I want you to think in terms of not coaching for productivity, but coaching for development. Right? The difference between productivity and development, coaching for productivity, and sometimes this is helpful, sometimes it's the most expeditious way to move the ball forward. But coaching for production is really just telling them what to do. Price it this way, quote it that way, add this product in there, and you're not teaching them to think, right? Coaching for development is a little bit more difficult, but it's stepping back and saying, okay, what's the overall pattern here? And how do I help this salesperson think for themselves, right? And so that's one key takeaway I want you to have is, now more than ever, coaching for development is really going to be important. This is a great opportunity for your team to learn and grow by you're not rushing to answer the questions. A lot of sales managers I work with, before we start putting in our coaching program, their whole focus is, how do I help you move deals through your pipeline? How do I help you with any technical issues? How do I help you with any pricing or discount issues? And there's not a lot of focus on what are the 2 or 3 areas you really need to improve in your salesmanship to grow and learn as a salesperson. So if you're a sales leader on this call, really have that coaching for development mindset versus just being expeditious and telling them what to do. It's sometimes easier to just tell them, but it's much more productive if you ask them, just like when you're in sales. If you ask them and they get to the answer, it's going to sink in. It's going to really help them figure it out on their own, rather than just relying on your brain to do the thinking for them. Some best practices for remote coaching. I mean, we can't communicate too much. For sales teams, I'm a big fan of daily huddles for other departments. I think sometimes sales teams get a little bit bored and a little bit frustrated with a daily meeting. In this environment, with everybody working remotely, I'm okay with a daily huddle for salespeople. Some of my clients, particularly if they have salespeople who are working remotely and have kids at home, morning huddles were not working. They're trying to get their kids on task and doing whatever online learning they're doing, or get working on their homework first. So a lot of my clients have switched to like a 5:15 in the evening huddle, and they do an end of day huddle where they kind of recap the day and then talk about what's going on tomorrow. So whatever time works for you and your team, but frequency of communication is important, and having a daily huddle is a good best practice. Number 2, catch them being good. I think as managers, if there's 10 things that we give a salesperson, they do 9 of them flawlessly, where do we focus? More often than not, it's like, well, why didn't this happen, right? I joke, my wife owns a preschool, and she's always going to conferences and development exercises and classes and whatever around classroom management or early childhood learning. the Venn diagram between managing salespeople and managing 3 and 4-year-olds, there's a lot more overlap than we might care to admit. One of the key classroom discipline strategies that I can take from her preschool and apply to salespeople is, catch them being good. Instead of, Johnny, don't throw blocks across the room. It's like, Johnny, I like how you're building that tower, right? It's the same thing with our salespeople. It's a different environment. There's more resistance. There's more put-offs and delays. Everyone's conserving cash. When they get a sale or when they do something that moves the needle forward or moves an opportunity forward, how can we celebrate that and really emphasize catching them being good? Recognize what they're doing well. It's not that we don't point out where they can improve, but if we're only focusing on the negative, it's just going to, again, we have to keep them mentally sharp and positive, right? So focus on the good. Frequent check-ins. Again, you have the daily huddle, but then check in with your team periodically one-on-one too. It doesn't have to be a structured coaching call per se. It can just be a quick check-in or, boy, you sounded a little bit off on the call last night. Everything okay? Checking in on your team. How are they doing? What are they working on? Keeping track. Frequent check-ins are really key. As you do those check-ins, as a leader, coaching for development, not just coaching for productivity, you want to start to look at overarching patterns, both at an individual rep perspective and also across your team. Where are they getting stuck? What are they running into? What objections are coming up? Where are they having success? What questions are really working and moving the conversations forward? What new challenges are coming up? As the team leader, as you look across the team and you look at all these different conversations and patterns that are happening, then you bring them into the sales huddles or into your sales meeting, and you start to share and say, hey, one thing that's working really well is, and one challenge that we have is, and if it's a challenge, leverage the power of the hive here, right? Let's get everybody brainstorming on what's a great way to overcome this, or we're getting pushback from clients on this topic. Let's all collaborate and come up with a good answer, and pattern spotting, pattern sharing, but also asking the salespeople, okay, this is what's happening. What needs to change? How do we need to approach this differently? Another best practice for remote coaching, practice. Hopefully you were doing role play before this global pandemic hit, but now more than ever is a great time to practice our craft, right? So setting up a Zoom room and exploring a concept and then breaking off into the little sub rooms where you can have 2 people at a time, kind of role play, come back and practice. It's really important if you're setting this up that you have the right framework for feedback. Most salespeople insert themselves in the middle of the feedback loop. You go through a role play, they say, well, what I would have done, and you have to really set the expectation that no, it's not about what you would do. Find something that they did that was exceptional. Catch them being good. And then maybe there's 1 or 2 areas where they have an awesome opportunity for improvement, but first start with what they did well, right? And take yourself out of the equation. When you're the observer or you're the person who's being practiced on, make it all about the person who's in that sales role, and then they'll do the same for you, right? So practice. As a sales leader, now's not the time to yell at people. We have to be a little bit more patient and forgiving, especially if we're doing the practice, we're doing role play. That's not something that comes naturally. We have to give them time and create an environment where it's safe for them to experiment and struggle and fail. Much better to fail in a practice environment than to fail with a customer, right? So now's the time to be patient and forgiving, especially in this environment. It's also okay to have a little fun, right? I mean, I think one of the questions that I've got a group of sales leaders at a client out in New York, and in one of their, every Wednesday they kind of compare and say, hey, what are you watching on Netflix right now? What shows are you binge watching? And they share best ideas. And, it's okay because we're all home. We're all probably watching more television than we should or doing whatever, so let's share that and have fun, right? We don't have the opportunity to have lunches out or go to happy hours or do fun events. So let's talk about whatever's on, Amazon Prime or Netflix. And then also remember, you're coaching the whole person, not just an employee, right? So check in on them. How's their family? How are they holding up if they've got school-age kids? Kelly and I were talking as we were getting ready to go live. I'm talking about my 6th grade son who's struggling with remote learning, right? Listen, empathize, hold up. I'm going to hit this point extra hard for both sales leaders and for salespeople. One of the ways to think about selling is sales is a transference of emotion. Right? You ask all the questions you want, you build the case, you connect with the customer, all that. But at the end of the day, the salespeople who sell in this environment are the ones who are able to make that emotional connection to the prospect, and they're able to transfer their enthusiasm for their recommendation. And it's not that it's impossible to do, but it's a heck of a lot harder to do if you're walking around like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. Oh, I don't know. I guess it's tough. If that's how you're coming across, nobody's going to buy from you, right? And so as a sales leader, best practice for remote coaching, check in. How are they doing as a person? As a salesperson, hey, how am I doing? Am I bringing the frustrations I have trying to get my middle schooler to do their math assignment? Am I bringing that into my next call, right? And so it's important to kind of check in. And so here's just a list of everything I just buzzed through. I know some people like the pictures, some people just want a list. So here you go. Frequent communication, daily huddles, catch and being good, frequent check-ins, pattern spotting and sharing, practice, practice, practice. It's okay to be patient and forgiving. Make sure you're still having fun, and you're coaching the whole person, not just the salesperson. So checking on them, how's their family, everyone okay, any concerns that they have. Let me pivot now and go to building a culture of accountability. And again, hopefully this isn't a new concept, right? Hopefully before we went to a remote environment, there was already a strong culture of accountability. What I tell sales leaders when it comes to accountability is you manage agreements and you coach people. You manage agreements and you coach people. So think in terms of short-term, focused, simple agreements. What do we need to accomplish this week, right? And you can look at it from different perspectives. What do we need to do from an account development perspective? What do we need to do in terms of adding new opportunities to the pipeline? What opportunities have been in our pipeline too long that we need to move forward or move out? And just put them on pause and revisit them in a month. Some of your salespeople may be involved in accounts receivable. What accounts do we need to call on and make sure that we're going to get paid? Whatever it might be. What are the short-term outcomes we need to produce? And then you kind of manage that agreement. And then if they're not able to keep that agreement, they're not able to achieve those outcomes that they agreed to, that's where we coach them. We have to figure out, well, what happened? Why weren't they able to do that, right? So you manage agreements, you coach people. When it comes to accountability, this is basically building a to-do list and then being a little bit more thoughtful about it. So from a sales perspective, building a culture of accountability is thinking in terms of outcomes, not activities, right? So if you look at this on a daily or a weekly basis, let's just say we're planning for the week. What outcomes do I need to produce this week, right? And the difference between an outcome and an activity, an outcome is I need to have 3 meaningful conversations with net new prospects per day, right? I'm making this up. That may be too few or that may be way too many. I don't know. But depending on where you are, right? So my outcome is I have to have three conversations with decision makers. An activity-based goal would be I need to make 10 cold calls a day or 20 cold calls a day or whatever it is. I'd rather have the outcome focus rather than the activity focus. If it takes me 15 calls to have 3 conversations, so be it. If I'm 3 for 3 the first 3 times I pick up the phone, I'm connecting with someone, I've hit my goal. Now, if I'm 3 for 3, I've probably hit a little updraft. I would encourage you to keep calling, right? Because you're in that kind of golden hour where you can just connect with everyone, keep going until your luck runs out. But focus on the outcome, not the activity. So this is nothing more than a to-do list. Most people on the phone probably have some form of, whether it's on a piece of paper, on an app on your phone, some sort of what do I need to focus on today, right? So there's that. But the next thing not everyone does, how long am I going to focus on the activities that will drive these outcomes? So for example, if my goal is to have 3 conversations with net new conversations per day, and I know I need to make calls to do that, how long am I going to budget for that? And let's say I need an hour of calling a day to do that. So I'm going to do 30 minutes in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon. So I'm going to focus 1 hour a day on the activity for this one outcome. And in a typical week, I might have 6 or 8 outcomes that I'm trying to focus on, right? So what is my outcome? How long am I going to invest in that? And then here's the secret sauce that almost nobody does. Many people build a list. Some people would think about how much time and effort do I need to put in this, although they don't always translate it to time. But putting it on your calendar. When specifically am I going to make those calls? And so if you can, I'm getting a little dry. If you can take a moment and think, okay, I'm going to make those calls between 8:30 and 9 every morning, get my kids on a good glide path for their homework, find a quiet place in my house, make calls for half an hour, right? And I'm going to move on to something else. And then also at 3:30, from 3:30 to 4, I'm going to do follow-up calls as well, right? And actually scheduling it out. So it's, what is the to-do list? How long? That's just being thoughtful about, okay, what time am I willing to invest in this? Don't make the mistake of over-scheduling yourself. A lot of salespeople, they'll book out 8 hours of activity. You've got to build in Slack. You've got to build in time for interruptions. You're going to get calls from your peers. You're going to get interruptions from customers or got-a-minute things that come up from your boss. So, in this kind of environment, if you're proactively planning 4 or 5 hours a day, that's really outstanding. And then budgeting that time on your calendar. So your calendar should be full. Your weekday calendar should have those activities mapped out. And it's not all calls. It might be, entering stuff into the CRM or building a list or following up on contracts or whatever it might be. But what am I doing? How long and when? And actually putting it on the calendar, right? And every day with a quick review of what did I achieve and what do I need to focus on tomorrow. So at the end of every day, you should be building your list for tomorrow. Again, what outcomes do I need to produce? How long and when am I going to do that? Right? And by the way, if you're doing a daily huddle as a team, and you take my advice and you do it at 5:15, if everyone on your sales team is reviewing their day, what outcomes they achieved, and they know what they're going to focus on the next day, they can report that at the meeting, right? And then also at the end of every week, kind of look back on Friday afternoon. You kind of look back. So I would set a recurring meeting on your calendar for 4 o'clock every afternoon and 3 o'clock on Friday, and you kind of look back at the whole week, and then look at what do I need to do next week, and what do I need to do Monday morning, right? So you're not struggling over the weekend and worried about what you have to do. It's already documented, right? So this is just the best practice. We have, by the way, a weekly planning sheet. I'm happy to share with you. I've got my email at the end of the slide deck. So if you send me an email, happy to share that with you. And it's just a very simple worksheet that helps you kind of focus on different activities and come up with your weekly priorities, and then you can kind of translate that to daily priorities. Your sales manager should know every day and every week, what are your goals? What are, again, that's part of accountability. We manage agreements, we coach people. So what are you focused on? What outcomes are you producing this week? That's really how we, how we create that culture of accountability. So again, we manage people, we coach, we manage agreements, we coach people, they go together. And when the salesperson isn't able to hit their goals, if they're not able to make their agreement for whatever reason, that's when the coaching begins. That's when we ask, okay, what got in the way? Did we set the goal wrong? Were we overly ambitious? Is three conversations per day like an unrealistic goal? What should it be? Or what got in your way? Do you need should we try calling at a different time? Were you uncomfortable? Did you not have a list? And that's where you start to get to maybe they're nervous about making calls, or maybe whatever it might be, right? That's where the coaching begins. But that weekly and daily proactive planning makes a huge difference, particularly in this kind of an environment where we're really all operating in an environment where we have a lot less structure and not as much going on. Let me pause here. I don't see, we've got a couple of the answered questions about the recordings. Any questions on? I'm buzzing through this pretty quickly. We got about 15 minutes left. Let me pause and see if there are any questions that might come up from what I've covered so far. Otherwise, I'm going to keep rolling and talk about peer accountability and feedback loop. I think that's my cue to keep going. I don't see any questions coming in, so we're good. Either I've put you to sleep or it's just so good you don't have any questions. So I'm going to go with the latter. Just assume that it's the second one. Okay, so peer accountability. One of the benefits of pairing up with somebody on your team and providing feedback and getting feedback from them is you learn. When you're the one providing the feedback, you actually can learn for yourself as well. So your act of coaching a peer will actually help solidify ideas in your mind and actually help you elevate your sales game as well. You have to be open to their feedback just the same. And again, serve them, don't make it about you. It's not about you. It's about how can I help you win this deal? How can I help you improve your questioning or your rapport building or whatever it is I'm coaching you on? It also has the benefit, your sales leaders are going to be pretty stressed out in this environment. I'm telling them daily huddles, frequent check-ins, check on the whole person, all of these things that I had in the first part of the presentation. If you can relieve a little bit of that pressure and give your peer a different perspective, it helps you learn, helps them learn, gives them a different perspective, but it also provides some relief for your manager. They're not feeling so much pressure to try and get to everybody, right? One of the tools that we recommend and a lot of our clients use is a tool called Refract, and this is a call recording software platform. But what's awesome about it is it allows you to really get good insights into a call. So here's a call I just did a screenshot this morning of a call I did in December. But I can find out, how much talk time did I have? When was I talking? Was the prospect engaged or not engaged? How many questions did I ask? What was my pace of speech? This is a screenshot. I can't scroll down, but there's a whole page of insights that you can get from that. When you use a platform like Refract, you get to leverage those call insights, and it's amazing. Every high producer. I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, so I'll pick on Aaron Rodgers, right? I guarantee Aaron Rodgers is. So I've probably offended everyone in Chicago and Minneapolis. Sorry, but high-performing athletes are looking at tapes of their opponents and looking at themselves, right? And so if you're able to listen to how you sound on a real phone call and then look at the insights and start to say, boy, I'm asking too many questions at the end. How do I spread my questions out evenly across the call? Or there may be filler words that you're using that you're not even aware of. How do I make sure I'm not saying those things? Or when it comes to talking about money, my pace of speech increases. And so how do I make sure I'm low and slow and not getting nervous when discussing budget, as an example? It also provides a way to get asynchronous and distributed feedback. So you could highlight a call for your manager to review or for your peer to review and say, hey, give me some thoughts. I really struggled. They asked this question. Here's how I answered it. It was, minute 6 of a 10-minute call. Just go right to that spot and listen to it, right? And they can actually type in and give you feedback or record how they would have answered it. It's great for peer-to-peer coaching. It also allows, on the platform, we can do scenario challenges. So if you're in a sales leadership role and you're spotting a pattern where a lot of people are struggling with this or that objection, you can put a challenge out to the team and say, hey, everyone answer, how would you answer this question that keeps coming up, right? And you get, again, the power of the group, and you get to listen to all the different answers and kind of highlight and spotlight the best answers. It's also a great way to share market insights and intelligence. And a little bit longer term, but if you have everyone on your team recording calls, you can start to tag key moments that are examples of how you want sales calls to run. And we actually have clients where we're embedding those moments right in their CRM. So we actually have an active sales playbook where, a new salesperson coming up to speed, they can listen to, here are the objections that come up, and here's how a veteran salesperson has handled that, right? So again, I'm mentioning this as a way for peer-to-peer accountability and feedback. It's an awesome platform, and if you're interested in information on it, just shoot me an email. Happy to share that with you. In terms of best practices for remote selling, here's the good news. If there's a silver lining in this environment, right? Go ahead and jump in. Customers and prospects are available universally. As I talk to the different, we work with middle market sales organizations. They tend to be B2B, probably very similar to the kind of companies that are on the call now. Universally, we're finding that people are home, they're available. People you couldn't get a hold of 4 weeks ago are eager to take your call now, because that means they're not trying to help their 5th grader learn long division. And they don't teach long division the way we learned it, or at least the way I learned it. And so I'm more than happy to jump on a sales call than have to teach middle school math or whatever, right? So your customers are available. A lot of our clients are finding that there may be no immediate sales opportunity, but they can start to look ahead and do planning work. I've got a software client that their platform is super configurable and highly, there's a lot of customization options. It works really well out of the box, and most people just install it, and then they build their requirements list, and they start to map out projects to enhance it and integrate with different systems in the company. Right now, they're doing a lot of that. They're not spending money on it yet, but they're doing all those requirements gathering. So in your businesses, as you're working with your customers, what are some of the planning things you can do? They may not have an immediate need right now, but how do you start to plan ahead and be ready? This is the old Bobby Knight quote, right? Always be in position to be in position. We're not going to be quarantined forever. So the conversations we have right now with people that normally aren't available, they're available now. Go have those conversations. And if there's no immediate opportunity, can you at least pivot toward, well, let's just look ahead, as we come out of this, what are the projects that you have in mind that you really want to focus on first? And how can I help make sure that you have the materials you need for that project or whatever, right? So go ahead and jump in. Organize sprints, right? So every day, you should be mapping out, what am I going to do, the list, how long, when am I going to do it? But I think in terms of 30 and 60-minute blocks, right? So organize a sprint and then take a break. Organize another sprint and take a break. If you have 30 focused minutes or 60 focused minutes, and then, get outside, take a walk, check in with family members. We're all working in a different environment. If you've got kids at home and you're like working in the den or whatever, it's okay to focus for 30 minutes, do a sprint or 60 minutes, but then go outside and walk the dog or check in with family members, find out how the homework is going. Some other best practices for actually running the call. First and foremost, I was going to have a picture of R2D2 here because it's about relationships and rapport, right? We're going through an uncommon event. This has never happened, right? It's similar. I mentioned at the beginning, it reminds me a little bit about right after 9/11 or right after the economic meltdown in 2008. But we're all going through this event, and it's a great opportunity to build rapport by sharing, how are you doing? How's your family? Everyone who knows me knows that my oldest daughter is a nurse, and I'm nervous as a dad. She's on the front lines at a hospital in Chicago dealing with COVID patients. Right now, she's got all the PPE that she needs, and that's great. But, I appreciate it when people call me and say, how's your daughter doing, right? So connect with them as people first. If they're doing okay personally, right, now we can pivot to, how is this impacting your business? And here's where everything I said at the beginning about selling value, asking great questions, getting them to think differently, that's where it becomes really important. You have to ask great questions, ask a lot of questions, and then be patient, listen, and look at the issue from every angle. Help them look at it from every angle. Sometimes I think we're so locked in on just making the sale, we're not really taking the time to walk around and look at it from every possible angle. And so if you have the patience and you ask questions and you think, well, how does that impact, this party or that party, or how does that impact your perception in the marketplace? We've got an opportunity to have longer, more in-depth conversations. Again, assuming that we've established the relationship and the rapport, and we're using this as an opportunity for that connection. As you're looking at it from every angle, that's where you quantify the impact of the issues that you're uncovering, right? Think time, think money, think quality, right? Look at it from every possible angle. But when we can convert the impact of whatever issues we're uncovering into an opportunity for improving their efficiency, or an opportunity for them to have a higher margin in their business, or to have a more quality project, those are all things that we can quantify and help build the case and create urgency for them to want to move forward with us. More important than ever, be memorable, stand out from the crowd. You'll be memorable by the questions you ask and by leading them through a conversation they haven't had before. And of course, take notes and really be on top of your follow-up now more than ever. This is something that's going to help you stand out from all the other salespeople competing for their attention. If you're the one who's Johnny on the spot, sending a quick thank you note and a quick follow-up, and honoring your covenants, ending every conversation with a clear next step and then following up, you'll step out and stand out from the rest of the crowd. So that's a little bit about remote selling. Let me quickly, I'm got about 7 minutes left, so just watching the clock here. In terms of systems and processes, right? I actually, if you follow me on LinkedIn, I did a video right when this all happened on just the gear that I use. Make sure you have a good camera. Make sure you have decent lighting. Think about the background. You don't want dirty laundry behind you or whatever, right? Zoom room has like that fake backgrounds you can do. I've got a blue wall behind me for a reason. Think about having a headset or a backup microphone. Make sure everything's fully charged, all that. Also, hopefully, I've got a lot of clients in technology. There's a lot of hacking activity, a lot of things that are going on. Make sure that you're connected through a virtual private network and you're not letting people in, right? Make sure you've got decent internet. Now's the time to be really disciplined about CRM. Now's the time to really make sure you're taking detailed notes and putting those in and following your sales process. If you have a platform like Refract, that's great. But even if you're just recording calls or having people listen in and doing those review loops another way, that's gonna help you. And then in terms of standing out, a lot of people will ignore an email. They won't ignore a video, right? We use a tool called BombBomb. It's a very simple tool. I can send an email. I can turn on my camera. I can record a quick 2-minute message or minute message. I can actually share my screen and show them a proposal or whatever. It's definitely a way that's going to help you stand out. BombBomb and Dove are two that I like that work really well. In terms of other systems and processes, most companies that we work with are using either Teams or Google Hangouts for connecting with team members through chat, right? So if you're all working remotely, you can still have your, salespeople always like to have their snarky conversations and share their sarcastic remarks. Do that on chat through one of these platforms. Zoom seems to be the dominant player in terms of what people are using for meetings, both internal and external. GoToMeeting, Google Hangouts, Microsoft Teams are also great platforms for that. I would tell people, especially if they're working from home, and I'll let the companies decide what they want to do like this, but probably when's the last time they upgraded their network? Everyone's home, they're watching Netflix. My daughter is a student at University of Minnesota. She's watching lectures online. Our internet was getting taxed, so we upgraded, got a Google Nest, which is great. I'm not promoting Google, whatever, but that's just a really simple router to use. But upgrading your router and maybe think about tweaking your internet speed if we're going to be working remotely for a while. And then really be vigilant about not clicking on the wrong emails. The hackers are out there, they're spoofing a lot, so it's a great message for everyone in your company, not just the sales team, to really be mindful of, let's make sure that you're thinking before you just click on an email that comes in. So that's what I wanted to talk about in terms of systems and processes. I'm going to flip to questions in a second. In terms of just where we come in as Intelligent Conversations, this is just a list of some of the things that we do. We spend a lot of times with sales leaders. That's really the sort of the tip of the arrow, if you will, or tip of the bullet, I should say, with this slide. So a lot of our work is building stronger sales leaders. We, of course, do sales training webinars and seminars. Whenever we can get back together and do live things, we help clients map out their sales process, territory planning. We help with sales hiring, Salesforce transformation, which we take a look at revamping the entire team and really enhancing the systems and processes. And we do get into a little bit of sales enablement. We have opinions about the better CRMs to use, platforms like Refract, et cetera. So these are some of the things that we can do. And with that, let me just put up my contact information. If you want a sample weekly planning or you want to learn more about Refract, just shoot me an email. Here's my cell as well. And let me see, it looks like we've answered all the questions, Kelly. I don't see anything else. I wanted to allow at least a couple minutes for questions. Anything else?
Oh. No, if anyone has questions, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A. Mike, thank you so much for this. This is a lot of great information and resources all in one convenient presentation. So
yeah, we're happy to help. And I know it was sort of a fire hose. I was trying to get through as much as I could in the time allotted. So
absolutely. And we will get the recording together and out. Hopefully we'll have that up by Monday, if not sooner. So we'll get that information out to everybody, and we'll get your contact information will be included in there as well. So we've got, thanks. We had one participant who had to sign off early who also said thank you. They're going to come back to the recording.
That's great. Let's just do this. So I'm sorry to be a teacher, Kelly, but let me just, instead of asking questions, everyone go to the Q&A and just type in the one lesson learned. What was your one nugget that you took from this that you found valuable or that got you to think a little bit differently? Take a minute and find the Q&A and just blast that in there so we can see what the takeaways are. And then, like Kelly said, this recording will be available and we'll go from there. This is the audience participation part. Here we go.
Yeah, okay.
BombBomb and sprinting. All right. Thanks, Gary. Coaching often, catching and being good. I love the 30-minute sprint concept. Awesome. Love it. Work using sprinting, push to connect as a group and individually, be consultative. Okay, these are good lessons. Awesome. Focus on outcomes, not activities. Great lesson, Brooke. Love that. Now they're flowing. All right. Chit chat on employee lives. Yep. Sales, remote sales productivity. Okay, good, Mark. Awesome. Good lessons learned, guys. So the key to this, right? So it's I'm glad you found lessons. I'm glad you found nuggets. The key to this is not just learning it intellectually. The faster you take this and actually put it to work for you. So take these ideas and put them into action, right? It's not enough to just learn. You know, knowledge in and of itself isn't power. It's knowledge put to action. So, you know, please, you know, honor the resources that Kelly's put together for you with this webinar and all the other webinars that this association is putting out there by taking these ideas and then putting them to action in your business. I'm just reading more of these as they come in. All right, good lessons learned, guys. All right, well, listen, thank you so much, Kelly. I appreciate you. I appreciate the invitation. Again, here's my contact information. If there's any interest in talking about how to take these concepts and how I could apply them to your company, happy to have a quick conversation. And you know, we'll share this recording when it's available, and we'll go with that.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great weekend, and we will have this recording out to you soon.
All right.
Take
Thanks,
care.
everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.